Well, good morning and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Dave Deacon. It's been an interesting week for weather across our great state, to say the least. Sure, we needed the moisture, but we probably could have done without all the ice that came with it. But this morning, we're talking about pecans before the ice storm with Becky, Carroll, and SUNUP's Curtis Hare.
Shakers are going across the state for the pecan crop. So Becky, last time we spoke, you were a little bit concerned with how the crop was going to be looking. So now that we're in, late October, how are things looking?
Well, we were doing great on harvest, had ideal conditions. The only complaint was that a lot of dust, so it was kind of a dust storm. But with the rainfall, that's going to help to bring that dust level down, but it's also going to keep our harvesters out for a while until it dries up again.
Yeah, so right now we are getting rain, which is, as you say, is good. But what about with the ice and accumulations with this ice storm?
The ice can be a really big issue. You can see our trees are fully leafed out and they've got that whole leaf load plus still a lot of crop in the tree. And so with that amount of weight, we may be losing some limbs to the ice and the freezing conditions.
So last year when we spoke for last year's crop, that was a bumper crop and it was really good. And it's down this year. Does that tend to be a cycle?
Yeah, pecans have an alternate bearing cycle, so they'll have a huge crop one year and then maybe nothing or a very small crop the next year. And here at the research station, we're kind of a little bit different. We manage our crop load each year, so we have a kind of a main, kind of a even crop each year. And so we can kind of change up that cycle to have a more even crop each year instead of an on and off.
When we spoke a couple months ago, you mentioned that we had that late April freeze that really impacted a lot of producers, particularly in the northeast.
Yeah.
How's that situation unfolding?
It's looking like we may have about 20 to 30% of a crop for this season. And it's not just in the northeast, it's spotty across the state. We had a lot of our growers along the Red River that had a lot of damage, and up into the south eastern part of the state, there was some freezing in that late April. So we lost a lot of those fruit buds that time. Some of them lost the low crop and they still had a little bit up at the top, but there was definite decline in the fruit load due to that freeze.
So as we're going forward, what are some things that still need to happen for those producers who are still getting shakers out and going into that second round?
Well, we're gonna have to wait till the ground dries up a little bit so they can get the harvesters out. But another thing that may affect how much of the crop gets harvested is the price this year. And it's still some uncertainty on the pricing. For the growers to get out and pick up the rest of the crop this season, a lot of our native growers are going to be later this season. And so they'll be looking at the market and see where the pricing falls. And if it's not worth their time to, for the fuel and the labor costs, they may not get out and harvest those pecans this year. So it kind of depends on where that pricing lands, if it's going to be harvested or not.
Well, just like 2020, it's all uncertain.
That's true.
All right, thanks, Becky. Becky Carroll, Extension Fruit Pecan Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Hello, Wes Lee here with the Mesonet Weather Report. The last week of October has sure been an interesting one as related to weather. A significant cold front brought us some much-needed moisture, but unfortunately, for many of us, it came in a frozen format. You may have seen this sketch before, but it shows that all wintertime moisture starts out as snowflakes. If it passes only through air in the lower atmosphere that stays below 32 degrees, it hits the ground as snow. But if it passes through a warm layer, then it can refreeze as either sleet or freezing rain, depending upon just a few temperature degrees. This week, the freezing rain was significant. Early in the week, the National Weather Service issued one of the earliest ice storm warnings ever issued for Oklahoma. As you can see from this picture, courtesy of the rural electric associations, the ice predictions became a reality. Tens of thousands of Oklahomans lost power due to the ice. Linemen have been working day and night since then to restore service. This cold front was very strong, as you can see in this graph. Daily, statewide, high temperatures were more than 30 degrees below what is normal for this time of year. Good news for temperatures is that next week, odds are we return to above normal temperatures as seen by the red colors. Now here's Gary with information on this week's rainfall.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, yes, that was certainly a whopper of an ice storm. It really rivals those ice storms we used to see back from 2000 through 2010 with those several 100,000 power outages across the state, lots of snow in the northwest as we get into the panhandle, and lots of rain just everywhere. If we take a look at the latest Mesonet rainfall report from the storm after it has melted, we can see some of those generous totals. So really a large area of 3 to 5 to even 6 inches of rainfall across central up through northeast Oklahoma, parts of north central and northwest Oklahoma, and then even higher totals as we get over into east central Oklahoma on the border with Arkansas. Now everybody got a good dose of moisture. The far western panhandle didn't get quite as much, but they still have some melting to do. We'll see where they end up. But again, they got more than a ½ inch of rainfall melted from that snow, which is certainly good news. What did that do for the drought monitor? Well, it improved the southeastern half of the state where there was drought or abnormally dry conditions. That was the only good total area that we saw before the Tuesday 7 a.m. cutoff where we can consider that precipitation for the drought monitor. So next week, I'm almost positive we will have a much better looking map even across the northwestern half of the state. We can see those changes really running right along the I-44 corridor over the past week. Again, 1 to 2 category changes in those areas. So again, we will see this green improvement area start to head up to the northwest next week. Well, now we get to dry out and we get to warm up a little bit. Certainly a welcome change, I think, for everybody. Next week's outlook from the Climate Prediction Center does show increased odds of above normal temperatures and also increased odds of below normal precipitation. So a little bit of a hiatus before we start to head for some other weather pattern. So that's Oklahoma weather in a nutshell, right? We were expecting drought to continue, and we get a gigantic ice storm and enough rainfall to really quench a lot of those drought problems across the entire state. So we'll just have to wait and see what's in store for us next. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
So many times on the show we've talked about the calculator, but Dave, usually that involves an Excel program or something like that. There's a new way for producers to access the calculator.
Yeah, the calculator is a beef cattle nutrition evaluation program. And yes, previously it was only available in the Excel format, so kind of a glorified Excel spreadsheet if you want to think of it that way. But that is available, and we can link it on your website. But just recently, we completed development of the app for your either iPhone or an Android.
Just briefly tell us what the calculator is and how it can be applied for the cattle herd.
Okay, well, so the original version of calculator only dealt with cows. Mm-hmm. You couldn't do growing cattle rations with it. Okay. In the most recent update of the Excel version of calculator, we addressed that, and now you can do all classes of cattle with that. But don't confuse that with the app, because right. The app is still cows only. Okay. So first calf heifers, mature cows, whether they're gestating or lactating, you can sit down and just in a few minutes on your phone kind of work out your winter nutrition program. So, you know, one of the strengths of any software program like that, whether it's on your phone or your computer, is that you can sit down and, you know, if you're willing to go to the trouble of having your hay tested so that you know what the major component of their diet contains from a nutritional standpoint, well then you can look and see, based on the stage of the production you're interested in evaluating, you can see, what type of supplement fits their requirements the best to match with the hay source or the grazing source. You can, compare alternatives. Just put in, let's say, for example, 2 pounds of 40%, 38% range cubes, or 4 pounds of 20% range cubes, and in just a matter of a few minutes, especially on this app, you can determine which is the most expensive, which makes the most sense. So if your cows need to gain a little weight, it estimates their performance or their weight gain. So you can learn a lot in just a few minutes. It just tries to simplify the complicated biological process of beef cattle nutrition.
Especially with cattle producers, they're always managing the margins, and this helps take the guesswork out of that.
Yeah, it sure does, because time and again the evaluation of the economics of a cow-calf program shows that 50 up to 60% of the entire budget for the year is a nutritional program, and a lot of that is spent on the cows during the winter period. And so Cowculator, whether the app or the Excel version, is designed to help you fine-tune that and minimize that cost.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Dave Lalman. And for more information on the Cowculator, both the program and then also the new app, you can find that on our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
So you've probably heard of the term carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is just the capture of atmospheric carbon dioxide in different plants, water bodies, and in the soil. Plants have the ability to sequester carbon through photosynthesis. So they're using carbon to do photosynthesis, and then they're emitting oxygen. Of the different plant types, trees can really sequester the greatest quantity of carbon. They do this because they're holding carbon in their trunks. They use carbon to grow their branches. Of course, their whole canopy with all their leaves all have carbon in them. And so because those plant parts are all above ground, that carbon is susceptible to different things like wildfire, disease, insect infestation, drought. All of those things can release carbon back into the atmosphere, especially wildfire. So some people think, well, maybe we can just sequester more carbon by planting more trees. Let's plant trees everywhere. Let's plant them in our grasslands and in our prairies. But that's really not a viable option. One of the reasons that that's not an option is that grasslands also store carbon. So grasslands store carbon in a little different way. Most of the carbon that they're storing is either in their roots or it's in the soil that surrounds their roots. And so this makes it a much more stable place for carbon to be stored. So when grasslands and prairies do burn, the carbon that's stored below ground is less likely to be lost back up into the atmosphere. So both of these plant types are really important for carbon storage for different reasons. But with the increase in wildfire frequency, maintaining our grasslands as grasslands is really, really important for the services that they're providing, in addition to their ability to sequester carbon. So if you'd like more information about managing grasslands and wildfire, visit the SUNUP website.
For the past few weeks, there's been a rally in the wheat markets, but Kim, there's recently been an 18-cent hit. So what's going on?
Yeah, we took a hit earlier in the week, but let's talk about how we got about $1.50 increase in wheat prices. First, we had good, strong export demand. The importing countries buying ahead because of the coronavirus, building up stocks. So that increased demand. And then we've got projected tight ending stocks in the Black Sea area with Ukraine and Russia. U.S. hard red winter wheat ending stocks projected to be around 350 million bushels. The average is over 500 million bushels. All U.S. wheat stocks are tight. Then you talk about the drought. We had dry conditions, planting conditions in the United States, in Russia, in Ukraine, dry in Argentina. So if you look at the hard wheat, the bread wheat, you got relatively tight stocks and you've got increased demand. That drove prices up. And then it rained in Russia, and we got moisture in the hard red winter wheat area. You can definitely see it here in Oklahoma. And that moisture, and then I think the market is concerned about all this buying ahead of wheat, because once we get through this coronavirus, then they're going to have excess stocks, and our demand's going to go down and prices will go down. So I think it's mostly moisture and concern about the market.
So, you know, other than being an ag economist yourself, you're also a professor. So, Dr. Anderson, is there anything that we can, you know, learn from this hit?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that we can learn. At the end of each day, whatever the price is, the next day's price, there's a 50-50 chance that it'll go up or it'll go down. Also, right now, we learned that the weather is very critical. We're in a weather market and prices can move quickly. I mean, in one day we just knocked 18 cents off of it, just like that. So I think the producer, the seller's got to be concerned about these price movements, and I think we can learn and know that prices are relatively volatile right now.
Does the market take any of this factor with the weather that's happened in the past week into consideration going forward?
Oh, I think so. I mean, rain makes grain, moisture makes grain. It was dry. We needed moisture, and I think we got this moisture ice. We don't need the ice, and there's some damage from that, but we got the moisture. It didn't pack the wheat fields where the wheat had been dusted in. We got a nice even rain on it, and that moisture is enough to bring that wheat up. So I think that's a positive impact for future wheat production. Also a negative impact on prices. So
moving on to corn and bean prices, how have those been looking?
Oh, we've been in an uptrend in both corn and beans. They continued that uptrend this week. I think we're going to see that happening. You've got soybean stocks in the U.S. projected to be really tight. Brazil stocks are tight. Right now, U.S. soybean prices are 60 cents less than Brazil. That's why we're seeing the market demand. You look out into December, they're about 40 cents below us, but we're competitive in the market. Those prices are increasing, and I think they will probably continue to increase as long as the harvest is not greater than we expect.
So last week when we talked, you did have some surprising news in regards to cotton, and that it's been going on a slightly uptrend. Is that uptrend still happening?
Yes, that is still continuing. It looks like cotton prices are trying to level out. They're kind of slowed down that trend. They're still in the uptrend, up in the low 70s, but it looks like they may be pausing that uptrend for a while.
All righty, Kim. Dr. Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
We got some rain earlier this week, but the drought is still ongoing. Amy, there's some programs to help livestock producers that have been encountering the drought.
Yeah, we've had several months where we've had some really dry conditions, and what that's done is it's put us in eligibility for something called the Livestock Forage Disaster Program. This is going to sound really familiar to people. We had a lot of counties eligible for this in 2018, so I think a lot of people are going to be familiar with it, but it's important to kind of brush up on the basics again. First of all, just making sure that your county is one of the ones that are eligible. I mean, we've had the Mesonet maps showing where we've been in terms of D1 to D3, even D4 drought in some of our counties. So you can contact your local FSA office to find out if that county is eligible for this LFP program.
What are some of the requirements as far as how strong the drought has been, and what those requirements are for the individual livestock owner?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it's going to vary. What the payment levels are going to vary depending on how severe the drought has been and how prolonged it has been. in that particular county. So we have what we call payment months on this program. So if you have been in a relatively shorter, less severe drought, you would only get one payment month in that county. That's true of some of our northern counties, some of our counties moving a little further into the central area of the state. However, if you've been in a really prolonged D3 drought situation, you're going to get more payment months. And that's really designed to reflect the damage that's been done to your grazing and how much assistance you might need to offset the market consequences for you having to sell livestock early because of those conditions.
And to process that, who do they need to contact?
So they need to contact their local FSA office, and they're going to ask a couple of questions. First, have you filed your grazing report? Making sure that that's annually in place. Another thing is that you have to have owned the cattle for at least 30 to 60 days prior to the time they had to be sold. So this is usually not a problem for a lot of our producers at this time of year here in Oklahoma, but it's just good to remember that it's an ownership situation for the cattle. The other important thing to remember is you can own the land or you can cash rent the land and still be eligible for this program. And then of course just having some evidence that the cattle were actually sold.
This is one of the many programs going on here in 2020. Where are we with, say, the CFAP 2 program?
So CFAP 2 is ongoing. This is a separate program with separate requirements dealing with a separate disaster situation. So until December 11th, CFAP 2 applications are still being accepted. Cattle producers are eligible for that for their non-breeding stock that were in inventory up until August 30th.
So you have, if someone is impacted by this, they obviously need to contact the FSA office, but then you also have some literature and some things available for producers.
We do. So we have a fact sheet online. It does cover those eligibility requirements you mentioned, and then talks a little bit more about the kinds of livestock that are eligible for this program.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Amy Hagerman. And for more information on that, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
One of the real advantages that fall calving cows here in Oklahoma have is that they calve in good body condition year in and year out because they're coming off summer grass when the calving season is occurring. But we must maintain that body condition on those cows into and through the breeding season. And that makes the month of November a really critical month for the nutrition of fall calving cows. You see, research done here at Oklahoma State University a number of years ago looked at what happened if we could maintain that body condition into and through the breeding season as compared to those cows that might lose one full body condition score between the time of calving and going into the breeding season. You see, what they had were cows that were about a 5.5 on our 1 through 9 scale and managed to keep that condition on them until the start of the breeding season. Those cows rebred at a very good 94% rate. Cows that were allowed to lose a body condition score between calving and the start of the breeding season and were starting in the breeding season at about a 4.5 on our 1 through 9 scale, they only rebred at a 73% rate, or a 21% difference in the pregnancy rates when we checked those cows later in the year. So that means that this month of November, when these cows are going from the calving season towards the start of the upcoming breeding season, that they're fed in such a way to maintain that body condition on them so that we don't have that drop off in the rebreed percentage. The question is how to do that. Well, I think if you'll take time to look up what the nutrient requirements of a lactating beef cow, that fall calving cow with a calf at side, look at her nutrient requirements, you'll see that she needs about 2.5 pounds of crude protein every day. If we think about the forages that she's consuming, that should provide only about 1 pound of crude protein per head per day. That 1,100 pound lactating cow, remember, needs 2.5 pounds. So we've got to make up 1.5 pounds per head per day from our supplement. So if we're putting out, let's say, a high protein supplement, a 40% protein supplement, then we're going to need to give them about 3¾ pounds of that each and every day in order to meet their protein needs. And if we'll do a good job meeting their protein needs, that'll certainly go a long ways to helping them do a better job of consuming and digesting the forage so that they get the energy as well. If we're using a lower protein supplement, say one of the 30s, then it's probably got to go up to about 5 pounds in order to make up that 1.5 pound gap that we're trying to fill in terms of getting enough protein supplement into those beef cows. So I think that ought to give us a starting place to look at the nutrition that we need to provide to those fall calving cows in the month of November and into and through the breeding season to make sure that they stay in that good, adequate body condition so we have that high pregnancy rates when we preg check them next spring, and that way we'll be satisfied with the calf crop that we get from those cows next year. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Well, that does it for us this week on SUNUP. If there's something on the show that you'd like to learn more about, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu. And while you're there, check out our social media. From the Purebred Center on the OSU campus, I'm Dave Deacon. And remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.